All right, so this is called Vim for Mere Mortals. So the goal of this talk is to get people who aren't familiar with Vim or people who have been using it for a while. I want to sort of advance their knowledge, some Vim basics, maybe talk about some stumbling points that new people often hit, and then maybe a few taboo subjects near the end, which will be fun, and then some tools to learn more because like, you won't learn it all today, you won't learn it all tomorrow. I've been using it for 13 years, I still don't know it all, so there's a lot to learn. So who am I? I'm Claytron on the internet, and in real life, most people call me Claytron. I work at Tinderbox, and as mentioned, I've been using Vim since 2003, so think I'm a bit of an expert, I guess. So Vim is retro. Vim has a bit of a steep learning curve. There's a great comic that shows that off pretty well. It can be kind of archaic at times because it is retro. I'll say retro, but it's also very powerful, and that's why we're all here to talk about it. So you're here to learn. It's obviously hard. A few people mentioned that they've tried to use it and feel like they aren't really using the whole power of it. But that's fine. You'll be awesome in no time. The key is to start with the fundamentals. There's this great blog post called "Learn Vim Progressively," and he has this quote. He says, "You start by learning the minimal to survive, then you integrate all the tricks slowly." It's a really good post that sort of introduces you to some concepts and how his thought process was to learn it. So I've been using it for a long time. I still don't know all the tricks, and I still learn stuff all the time. Especially for groups like this, or just learning constantly. So if you get nothing else out of this talk, you should use VimTutor. VimTutor will teach you everything you need to survive inside of Vim, and pretty much that's all I learned way back when in 2003, and that's all I needed for 6 years of using Vim, because I was mostly using it for sysadmin work and just logging onto servers and editing files, so it was pretty good intro to Vim itself. And if you're using NeoVim doesn't actually ship with a VimTutor executable, but if you open up NeoVim and start with the tutor command, it'll give you a sort of advanced VimTutor. So someone wrote a plugin called Vim Tutor Mode, and that's what is bundled with NeoVim. And it's actually pretty cool. It's set up in a way that you could write tutorials for other projects or other plugins. So you could just be like tutor some plugin name, and it'll guide you through how to use the plugin, which is pretty neat. So I learned that by writing this talk. So if you really need a Vim tutor, or you have people that are new to it and you don't want them to have to run a command inside of Vim to do it, you could create an alias like this and just run the command directly using the NVim executable. Start off with a little bit of terminology, because I think this is one thing that threw me off when I first started trying to use it as my sort of main development situation. This is from the window help page inside of Vim. So a buffer is the in-memory text of a file. So when you're editing a file, you're in a buffer. And then a window is a viewport onto that buffer. And then a tab page is a collection of windows. So this is the biggest stumbling point for a lot of people. People think tabs, yeah, I'm gonna use tabs, just like I do in Sublime or Atom or whatever. But a tab is not a tab in Vim. A tab is really just a sort of a view. It's like a different way of looking at a project. So I use it, I may have one tab that is my back-end code, one tab that is my front-end code, or this is Ruby, this is JavaScript, this is something else. So it's a way of sort of splitting up your project. And once you think of it that way, it makes a lot more sense. So here's what it looks like. So this is one tab looking at one buffer, and so this is actually the help window for window, or help for window. And so there's just one buffer and one tab. And then this is actually the source for this presentation. So this is another tab with one buffer split into 3 windows. So I just have the same file split vertically and then horizontally, so I can sort of have a nice way of editing everything. So that's the first bit of terminology I want to get out of the way. Because I felt like when I started, tab was a really confusing thing, and I was like, I don't understand that at all. So the next biggest thing that's a stumbling block for most people is modal editing. So Vim is really the only thing I know of that sort of changes the way you interact with the editor at such a level. So this is really what confuses a lot of newbies. But it's also what makes Vim super powerful. So Vim has 6 basic modes. We're only going to really talk about normal, insert, and command mode. But there's also visual, select, and X. Visual is a really awesome mode, but I don't have time to really cover that. And there were some other modes I hadn't even heard of before in my life when I was writing this presentation, so there's definitely more to learn. So who has heard this joke before? How do you generate a random string? Anyone know the answer? No? Nobody? That's right. Put a first-year CS student in front of Vim and tell them to save and exit. So this is why normal mode is hard. So normal mode is just the mode you start in. When you launch Vim, you're in normal mode. And what that does is it creates sort of a layer of keyboard shortcuts for you to use. So I think most everyone here has used Vim, so I don't need to explain that too much, but it just gives you a really powerful way to interact with the text on your screen. And then there's insert mode, which is what that first year CS student's trying to get into. But it's just like it sounds. It's really just editing text. That's all you do there. But it's just another mode of Vim itself. So this is just, like once you get into insert mode, it's like any other editor you've ever used in your life. And then there's command mode. So command mode gives you a way to interact with Vim, run commands, change settings, run external commands, get help, do all kinds of other things. So it's a really powerful thing as well. But it's, as mentioned earlier, it's kind of archaic. It's like it is a command line within a command line app. So it's kind of a little bit meta. And all the commands are prefixed with colon. So you'll see throughout the presentation some sort of pointers to help and some other things, and you'll see those prefixed with a colon. So that's already a lot of information, I feel. So you're going to need help at some point. Luckily, Vim comes with built-in help. So the help is just a command. You just do :help. So as soon as you hit colon, it puts you into command mode, and you have a command line, and you can just type help, and that'll take you to the help intro, and then from there it guides you through all kinds of other stuff. You can also get help on help, which tells you how to use help, which seems kind of silly, but help is kind of complicated in Vim. It uses things like C tags to guide you around all the different help topics, and the help will tell you how to do that, because you'll see things like highlighted in help, and you can usually go to that and then go to that specific page of that help. So the help is actually quite helpful on help. So help has different like subjects or different syntax for the different types of things you're looking for. So syntactic, does anyone know what syntactic is, or anyone not know what syntactic is actually? So syntactic is a way to check your file for errors. So if you're writing a Ruby script, you can use Rubocop to check it, or if you're using JavaScript, you can use JSHint or ESLint or whatever. So it's just a plugin, and we'll talk about plugins later. But if you wanted to get help on it, you would say help, and then you can type syntactic, and that would take you to like the main help, or you could do help, and then with single quotes, this is an option within that plugin. And then if you do help and then colon, it's a command. So when you start to like tab complete the help, you kind of know what type of help or what type of thing you're looking at just in the completions. So it's kind of nice. And you'll see all that stuff in the help files itself. And I'll show an example in a little bit of what help actually looks like. You can also search through the help. I don't really use this ever. And when I tried to use it to test it out, it was really hard to use. Again, it was very archaic. You can use regular expressions to search, but you have to use the /C at the end of your search string to make it actually useful. But you can do help grep and figure it out from there. I probably would have used this a lot more starting out had I realized it. but Google's good enough for most searches. So I find that the help, so when you do help, it will split your current window in half and then give you the help on top. And so if you're in a small space or you have a bunch of other panes open or buffers open and windows, it's kind of annoying. So what I've done is I've created an abbreviation, and there's a link to it at the end of the slides. And the slides are actually on GitHub already. So if you go to Claytron/Vim for Mortals, the slides are up there and the source and everything. So if you want to check out those links before we get there. I like it when you can actually open up a tab with the help in it. So that way it doesn't disrupt your current workflow and just opens up a new tab and you can switch back and forth between them while you get help. Because I felt the other way, it really broke my concentration all the time. And I'm like, all right, where am I at? What am I doing? So I just have, like, when I type help, it actually abbreviates to tab help. And if I type help grep, it actually does tab help grep. And it takes me into another tab, which is super nice. So here's an example of what the help looks like. I just wanted to show off a little bit here. So here's all these things here are the things you could search for when you pull up help. So if you do :help, so this is you can help on the help command. You can get help on the short version of it. So you can see here, it's :h, and then in brackets is ELP. So that means you can use just :h to use help, or you can use the full version. So most commands have a shortcut, which is kind of nice. And then, of course, we have a Slack channel set up. It's up on the Meetup page. There's an Heroku invite app where you can just get logged into it. If you want to talk to humans outside of your local area, you can hop on Freenode on IRC. There's a #Vim. People are pretty helpful in there. It's a pretty active channel. And then if you have like a very specific problem, there's a VI and Vim specific Stack Exchange. I think it's still in beta, so I don't know if it's always going to be there, but it's another great place to sort of get help from other humans. So once you know the basics, so once you've gone through Vim Tutor, once you know how to use the help, then the next step is sort of learning how to speak Vim. And the first thing you can sort of look at for help on that is help on motion.txt. And that describes, that goes into very deep detail on how that works. So that's why sometimes the help is a little difficult to use because it goes pretty deep on a subject. It doesn't like hold your hand through using these things. So yeah, this could be a little overwhelming at first. But basically what it's going to talk about is when you're in normal mode, you can do something like this. So you could say 2D 3W. And so that's when that student is creating all the random strings because they're just like, how do I get out of here? And they're just deleting text and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So the sort of anatomy of a normal mode command is a count. And then, so you can do a count on an operator. So in this case, we're going to delete something. And then there's a motion. So we're going to delete and then 3 words. So we're going to delete 3 words twice. So in the end, this command, which you'll never ever use, which is an example, will delete 6 words. It's just kind of weird, but it's just show the full like breadth of what you can do. Once you realize this sort of way of thinking, then a lot of plugins also use this mode of thinking. And then things like, as soon as you know what the shortcut keys might be, then you can sort of apply this pattern and the plugin becomes super powerful. You don't have to really like look it up. You just kind of know how it works. So here's an example of a normal mode command. Does anyone know what this would do? That's right, go to the first line.
I don't know if G is capital G is last line.
Yep.
So, yeah, I don't know about those middle ones.
So this will, yeah, like I said, GG goes to the top of the file. What's that? You would. So GU is GU is lowercase. So here you're going to the top of the file, you say GU, and then it wants to know what you want to lowercase. You give it the motion of the end of the file. So it goes from the top of the file to the bottom of it, and then lowercase is everything. And this is called the Jerry Yang treatment. He was the I think he was the co-founder of Yahoo, It was notorious for sending out emails in all lowercase, even like emails firing you, like everything was in lowercase. The guy's apparently kind of a trip. So that's called the Jerry Yang treatment. I just always remember that from some like cheat sheet, and I was like, why would you ever do that? But I think it's a funny example of how powerful and expressive Vim commands are. That's right. So then here's another like example of doing of what a Vim command looks like when you're looking at it. So this is a pretty simple one. X deletes a character and P pastes it, so it will just transpose characters, which is a really neat trick. If you don't really think about it, you're like, oh, you might do that another way, but here you can just do XP and you transpose two characters. So that's the power of Vim right there. So sort of looking back to our first example, we'll talk about using delete. So delete is the operator here, and in this case, we want to delete till the end of the word. So if I'm in the middle of the word, this will delete from there till the end of the word. Then there's inner word, so you could delete inner word. That's how I like to remember it, so it makes sense. Or delete in word. This will, so if you're on a word, you do DIW, it will delete the whole word instead of from where you're at to the end, which is super handy, especially if you're doing change. So you could change inside of a word and then go to the next word and just hit dot to repeat that as many times as you want. So that no matter where you're at in that word, it'll do that thing. And then here you get an example of deleting two words, so using that the count on the W. So here we say delete, we say we want to do twice for words. So we do two words, delete two words. And then another motion is, for this one is DD, you could do delete a line. And then you could likewise do the same thing, you could delete two lines, so D2D. So you're starting to see a pattern emerge here. And this works in all kinds of different places. Like I mentioned with change. So here's two different operators. So we have change and visual. And they're all pretty much the same, just depending on which operator you're using. So here, we could change a word, we could change inside of the word, we could change two words, we could change till the end of the line and not include the line break, or we could change all the way to the end of the file. Or we could do similar things with visual mode. So visual mode is just a way of like seeing what you have selected. So all those commands work the same way with visual mode. And I like visual and change, I use these all the time. I mean, these are staples of using Vim itself. Or you could do something crazy like this. So you can even give a count to the insert command. So you can say here, I say, I want to do this insert 68 times, and then I type a dash, and then when I hit escape, it will give me 68 dashes. So I just created a vertical bar with that, instead of like just holding dash and go all the way into the line. So you can kind of use your imagination a little bit with all the commands that are out there and like all the plugins. So most of the time people write plugins so you can do this kind of stuff right here, which is super handy. So again, a little refresher on that. So we have our count, we have operators, we have another count, and then we have motions. So this is really what, to me, makes Vim the thing we all love. And I'm sure some people have used this, some people may have maybe touched the surface of this, but I think this, once you understand how this works, then life becomes a lot easier. So yeah. Any questions so far? Yeah, so you can load up help on the motion.txt and learn all about all that stuff, even more excruciating depth. So here, I told you I was going to get to some taboo subjects. Who here has been told they cannot use the arrow keys when they're using Vim? Yeah, who has told someone that? Of course. So, I mean, for me, like when I first started using Vim, I used the arrow keys. I mean, I'm not going to use HJKill. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. So I think when you're first starting out, like don't be afraid to use the arrow keys. I know there's some like Like I know Thoughtbot has like a Vim or like a .files distribution that they sort of put up on their GitHub. And when you go to use it and you start up Vim and you hit the arrow keys, it like gives you a message that says like woof woof or something, sort of like Screen would back in the day. And you're just like, really? I just want to go over. And I'm just like, ugh. Like, I mean, maybe it's where my fingers were closest to, you know? You don't know if I was always on the home row. I mean, you don't know me. You don't know me. There is actually a plugin called Hard Mode. So if you really want to take it to an extreme, you can install this plugin. It won't let you use your arrow keys. When you're in normal mode, like it forces you to use certain things. It's kind of a silly thing. It's linked at the end if you really want to make your life hard. I mean, it's called Hard Mode. I didn't try it out, but I imagine I just read the description and I was like, ooh, that sounds terrible. So you know, we want to make the switch as easy as possible, right? Like if you're coming from some other editor, there's no reason not to use the arrow keys. So from the Vim help, it says experienced users prefer to use HJKL because they're always right under their fingers. And I agree with that. It's a great statement. That's part of one of the reasons I love Vim, because my hands barely ever leave the home row. But beginners often prefer the arrow keys because they don't know what the hell HJKL does. And then this is my favorite part of the help here. The mnemonic value of HJKL is clear from looking at the keyboard. Think of J as an arrow pointing downwards. I'd never seen this before in my life, and I was just like, I stared at it for a while, and I was like, how does that make sense? And then I was like, oh, I guess that does make sense. But then it's silly.
What font is he using? How does it look like an arrow? So what is the H then?
Right, that's what threw me off too. But they're just saying that H, yeah, well H. That's wrong, yeah. Well, I think what they're getting at. Case for climb. And it's obvious. And it's obvious that it's for climb and it's the opposite of left. I think what they're saying, so if you know that J is down, that does obviously make K up. And then H and L are on either side, so they make sense. So if you really think it through, the mnemonic is great. But when I first read this, I was like, how does that help me at all? That's so dumb. Right? Exactly. So this is the glory of Vim help. Maybe not always so helpful. But once you figure that out, and once you realize J is pointing downwards, you become a Vim wizard. So, I mean, I feel like I'm sort of a Vim wizard because I've been doing it for so long, but you don't need to be a Vim wizard. You can use the arrow keys. It's fine. Oh, and you can also use your mouse. I know this just started riots in the streets. You can see there's things burning. This is me standing in the street saying, you can use your mouse. It's fine. I mean, a mouse is an excellent input tool. I like to use the mouse to scroll. Scrolling with keyboards sucks. It's terrible. It's not smooth. You know, it's going line by line. When I'm scrolling with my mouse, I got a little scroll wheel. It's what it's made for, right? Resizing windows also sucks. You can do Control W. Well, you have to give it a count. You can do like 20, Control W, right bracket, and then you moved it over 20, and then you're like, crap, that was nowhere near enough. Then you got to do it again. And like, that was too far. So the mouse is good for this type of stuff. You just drag a window. You move it to exactly where you want it. There's other things, like if you use a Mac Vim, it gives you more, like gives you a right-click menu. Like, none of this is shameful. Like, I don't know why, like, mouse equals A, or what, set mouse equals A. Like, do it. It's awesome. No shame. And just remember me in the street, flicking everybody off. It could be me. So once you get to a point, you're going to want to, like, you've done Vim Tutor, you've started to realize how text objects work and motions and all that. You're going to want to start customizing things. There's a few ways you could do that. You could do like me, way back when there was no other options, and you just write all your Vim config by hand. That kind of sucks. Like the default Vim configuration, as I think all of you know, is terrible. It's tabs by default, It's, there's just so many things wrong with it. And I think that's why a lot of people run away screaming. That didn't scare me, apparently. Well, thanks to my brother for forcing me to use it. So I just went with it. But those types of things, like tabs being the default, and like I can't remember. There's just things that really bother me about it. I'm not seeing line numbers, like things humans want when they're syntax highlighting. Syntax on. The hell. So it comes from a different place. Like I said, it's retro. All it's meant to do is just edit some text on a server. But you could use some of these tools to start out. So Vim Sensible was written by Tim Pope. It's just sort of a set of sensible defaults, like turn on syntax highlighting, turn on line numbers, use spaces instead of tabs, do auto indent, like all these things that just sort of make sense. So you could use that as a basis and sort of build your own. Or you could use one of these others. I think the newest one of these is Vim Bootstrap. And I think it was built by the guy that does NeoVim, Theo. And it's a website you go to and you sort of say what programming languages you use and a couple other things, like if you prefer spaces or tabs and yada, yada, yada. And then it spits out a VimRC for you to use. So it basically puts in the blocks for like tools I would need to use to do Ruby, or tools I would need for Python or JavaScript. And it gives you like, I read through it, I did it, and then I read through it and I was like, yep. This is like, I was like, this looks like my VimRC. So that could be a good way to start out. And so that gives you the full VimRC for you to put into your dot files and use from there. There's other things like Janus or SPF13. These are meant more of a, like, you download their distribution and you run a command and it gives you all this crazy stuff. So that's sort of the complete other end of Vim Sensible. And they're going to lock you into certain things. Some of these, like SPF13, I don't know how much that's still maintained, so you may be locked into something that no one else maintains anymore, and you may end up actually throwing all that junk out, and then, all that stuff out, the cool stuff, and then go back to like Vim Sensible or something and start over. So I would recommend doing something like that. Just starting with a plain one with no help it's going to take a while to get to where you want to get. So once you do that, you're going to want to install some plugins, because Vim without plugins also sucks. So there is a ton of plugins. I have quite a few installed, and I use almost all of them all the time. Every once in a while I'll go through and be like, I don't know what this is, and I'll delete it. But so this is something you'll be doing very soon. There are, unfortunately, a ton of plugin managers. Probably the most popular one back in the day was Pathogen, which is pretty simple. You just put stuff in a folder, and then it reads in that folder and loads it. Then along came Vundle, which gave you more like ways to like pull stuff down from GitHub and do all kinds of other stuff. Vimplug is the one I would recommend. It's super fast. It's awesome. The guy who writes it, June Gunn, he's one of my heroes. If you've come to my other Vim talks, I think June Gunn will come up in everyone somehow. The guy is pretty incredible. There's all these other ones. I just went and tried to find as many as possible. There's more than this, and it's scary. And a lot of times you'll see on like a plugin page, do this to install with Pathogen, or do this to install with Vundle. And I've seen a lot of them switching over to do this to install with Vimplug, and I'm like, yeah. So this is how you would use Vimplug. It's pretty simple. So we were talking about Vim Sensible, and I talked about Syntastic a little bit earlier. So we just put this in your VimRC, and then run plug install, and then it's going to go off on its merry way and download these plugins, and you're all good to go. So I probably have like, I don't know, 100 plugins maybe, I don't know. It does it fast, very fast, because it does it in parallel, and it's really smart about it. It'll do like a depth first checkout, so it's a really nice way of installing plugins. When I started, there was no way to do this, and it was all just in my .files repo, so it was just huge and full of this junk, but now it's pretty awesome. So then once you've installed the plugins, you kind of know your way around, then you're going to start pillaging people's VimRCs. So mine's up on GitHub, so claytron/.files /tree/master/.vimrc, if you want to get really specific. You can go look at my VimRC. It has a lot. Mine has tons of comments in it, and oftentimes it says I stole this from here, or I stole this from here, or I made this, or this cures some problem I have. So it's all in my VimRC, and I've been looting and pillaging other people's VimRCs for probably for 7 years, just straight looting people's stuff. So there's a lot of knowledge and things in there. I actually went through there recently and cleaned up some stuff, because last meetup I actually showed off my VimRC, so I wanted to make it tidy for everyone. But that's a great way to learn tricks, learn shortcuts, learn all kinds of stuff. Some features you may not even know, like you see some setting turn on, and you're like, what is that? So that's a great way to learn. And that's all I had for my talk. Any questions? No questions. Don't use arrow keys. Yeah, don't use arrow keys. Never use the Vim tutor. Just go. Just do it.
How do you avoid errors when you're loading plugins if you're on a computer that doesn't have those plugins installed?
So the question is, how do you avoid errors when the plugins aren't there and you're using them?
If you're using the plug,
You just plug install.
if you had to run plug install, it wouldn't matter.
Right. It shouldn't. Have you run into that before?
Bundle.
Oh, okay. Bundle itself. Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't know. I guess the first thing I do, I guess Vim plug is like installed with my dot files, so it's a part of my dot files, I think, and then it just bootstraps everything else. So as long as that's there, it's good to go. Any other questions? Comments? Good.
Bootstrap thing is kind of cool, so it actually recommends plugins for you also.
Yep.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Vim bootstrap thing is really neat. I was pretty impressed with the output and the settings it used. That got my big thumbs up for that one. That's a good starting point. Anybody else? All right, so the slides are up already. I'll put them up somewhere else, like on SlideShare or whatever. There's a ton of links. A lot of them I didn't even talk about. There's a link to VimIndy in case you need to find that. I think you guys found it. So this is my little help always in a tab, which is in my dot files. My VimRC, the Vim hard mode, which I did talk about. There's this thing called Vim Galore, which I found while I was doing this. It's sort of like a GitHub repository with just a collection of links to all kinds of other places and resources and cool stuff. There's screencasts. So has anyone heard of Vimcasts? So Vimcasts are amazing. Like, I had been using Vim for a long time when he came along. He actually taught me that G underscore trick. So like, if there's $, right, you can select to the end of the line, but that'll get the line break at the end. G underscore goes to the end of the line and ignores the line break, which is almost always what you want anyway. So I learned that from watching from Vimcast. He takes really simple topics and really, really explodes them, and you're just like, oh crap, I didn't know you could do all that stuff with very simple stuff. Derek Wyatt, he's also been around for a long time doing this stuff. He has more in-depth tutorials. They may be like 20 minutes long. Vimcasts are always like under 5 minutes. They're super quick, bite-sized things. He also does a great series on Fugitive, which I finally forced myself to use after many years, which is a Git plugin for Vim, which is really awesome. Then there's lots of articles and books. There's the one I mentioned right at the beginning, which is Learn Vim Progressively. Steve Losh wrote Learn Vim the Hard Way. So if anyone's heard of Learn Python the Hard Way, or Learn Ruby the Hard Way, or C the Hard Way, same. So he did his own version of that for Vim, because Vim script is pretty terrible. I don't know has anyone written any Vim script? Yeah. It is hard. The help doesn't help too much. This is a really great resource. Even if you're like modifying your VimRC, this will help with that, because your VimRC is VimL. So this is a really nice resource. There's this one article. This one sort of the arrow key argument. This is by Yehuda Katz. Everyone who tried to convince me to use Vim was wrong. And I think it brings up some good points. It's like, yeah, sure, use the arrow keys, that's fine. Another thing I changed right out the gate when I started was, like, J and K go up and down a line, a visual line, or not a visual line, an actual line. But GJ and GK go up and down a visual line. So if it's wrapping text across your editor, you'll go down where you expect to go. So there's little stuff like that you can do to make you feel more at home. And then Learn to Speak Vim is all about sort of the motions and operators and all that stuff. And also the Vim text objects, the definitive guide is another one that sort of goes through all that stuff in depth. And then the same guy who did Vimcast also created a book called Practical Vim. I have it, never read it, but I think it's good. Didn't you get it? Have you read through it? Same situation? Okay. But he's a really good, he's good at explaining things, so it's a pretty good book. And then those are all the pictures I used, and this is licensed under Creative Commons, because I'm cool like that. And that's it.
I actually had a question.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just realized. If you're starting out, Vim or NeoVim?
Oh, okay, so yeah, if you're starting, which one should you use, Vim or NeoVim? Depends on operating system, yeah. Does NeoVim not work on Windows?
It's sort of is a lot, but I wouldn't recommend it if you're just starting out.
Yeah.
Are you SSHing into a lot of production servers that don't have text installed? Like at a minimum, learn the VI.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That shouldn't really matter on your own machine.
Yeah.
If you SSH to a server, it automatically already has VI installed on it because you're SSHing.
I mean, I would say right now NeoVim's maybe a little harder to install, but I guess not really. It's in most package managers. For a while, it wasn't even in a package manager anywhere, so it was kind of a pain. But I think it's now in most things. I use NeoVim. It does crash on me every once in a while, especially if I'm like doing a search or for some reason when I use the quick fix list, it dies on me, which is pretty annoying. I only run into it spuriously when the quick fix list is huge. It doesn't like that. Otherwise, the only other issue I had was their terminal emulation stuff inside of NeoVim was interpreting Control-H in a different way than I had set up in my config, and it was just typing a delete for me when I did that, which is pretty annoying, but I found a workaround for that. So other than that, yeah, it's been pretty smooth for 0.2. Are they 0.2 now? Like, my confidence is high on the 0.2.
Does it say that in the help?
What?
Does it say that?
This?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. This is actually a cool command. Like, I was wondering how to do this, and I found it, and then I went to the help, and I was like, oh, little joke in there, nice, little Easter egg. All right, well, anyone else have any questions? All right, thank you.